Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 120. My name is NBZ, and my ass is on fire. I'm joined by Bally. How are you, Bally?
I'm very good, NBZ. Why is your ass on fire?
Well, I'm at my grandparents' house and just had a nice chicken curry for dinner not maybe half an hour ago, and already I feel like I need to just shit bricks. I love my grandparents' spicy curry, but it is something that is definitely not good for my stomach or the nether regions. So
Can't handle the post-E3 heat.
Exactly, yes. It's like the curry in Smash Brothers, and it's just been jammed all the way down my body. And I'm just like Mario, just flaming breath. I remember back in the day doing curry-only matches with our good buddy Ali T, because you would never do weird fun stuff like that with me.
I feel we've shifted a lot more towards my side of vanilla with Smash Brothers than
we definitely
did back in the day.
But also, I still enjoy a good metal, fast, bunny ears, high gravity style match.
You know what the new one's going to be, MBZ? It's got to be Big Blue with the Gust Bellows only.
Oh my god, that's such a good idea!
And someone mentioned it on the podcast before. I can't remember who, but yeah, we've got to try that. And I think there's some setting where you can't take damage, so it's purely just push each other off.
Yeah, that sounds fun. That sounds like a good idea that we should do. It reminds me of back in the day when we would play Soul Calibur matches where you'd set the health to infinite and you just play on the ice stage. So you would try and just slide people off the stage. Yeah. That was really good. I love that. I love when you kind of make your own fun in games like that. It's very cool. And Smash Brothers is one of those games that there are so many options that you can do a lot of cool stuff like that. So yeah, despite the fact that we love a good old Fox-only Final Destination, no items are still great. And I'm sure, the anticipation is building up because Smash Brothers was the big thing at E3, wasn't it? So that's the thing that we're all waiting for on Switch later this year. So, Bally, tell us what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this show today.
We've got a bit of an E3 debrief episode, so slightly shorter show, 2 segments, just because we've been doing so much podcasting recently, I think.
I know, yeah.
First segment, we're going to be talking about what we have been playing, and second segment, we'll have the E3 debrief. We're going to have a little run through around what people are saying at this stage about Nintendo, and then we'll have a quick run around some of the other announcements and other conferences and all that good stuff.
Maybe talk about our predictions and how completely wrong we were.
Of course, got to mention the predictions.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's going to be the show today. We should probably say that you should all be playing Punch-Out on the Wii, because that is coming up next week. We're going to be talking about it for our Backlog Club. So get your emails in, get your thoughts in. You can go to our Discord, which is always linked in the description of the YouTube and the podcast version. So head over there to talk about it. And also send in emails to our email address, which Bally will now tell you.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And of course, we should mention Punch-Out Wii is quite a short game, so if you've not even started it yet, there's ample time to beat the whole thing for next time if you want to be a part of that conversation.
Absolutely. I think there's there's a lot of extra stuff you can do in that game, and it goes on for a while. But if you just want to beat the main campaign, then it doesn't take that long, and it's good fun. It's a good challenge, and I think we've both really been enjoying it. So excited to talk about it next week. Or 2 weeks' time. And yeah, so let's kick things off then, Bally, with some video games. What have you been up to? What have you been playing recently?
So I was away in Loch Lomond last week with my girlfriend and my parents for the week, which was quite nice.
A retreat.
E3. Yeah, a retreat where there was plenty of time and space in the evenings where I'd stay up and watch a bit of E3. So I really got on top of the press conferences this year, which was nice, but also had some chill time. And I between chilling and between watching E3, I tried to squeeze in a bit of game time. So I've been playing Celeste on my Switch.
Yeah.
This game, a few months ago, it came out, I think, in January, February.
Yeah, it was like the start of this year, basically.
But the reveal of that game back in the Direct, that I think was at the start of this year, maybe in January, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
Celeste was completely off my radar. Even when I saw that, I thought, that looks cool, but I mean, there's so much on my plate. Am I really going to play this game? But you cannot ignore the hype, MBZ. There was just too much hype around this game. Not just from yourself. Of course, you absolutely love this game. And
I fucking love it MBZ, so
much. You're the biggest reason I play a lot of these games. So don't worry, you're not left out of the equation on this one.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
So many people talking about this game. And I think I like to owe it to myself that you just got to try out the Game of the Year contenders, and especially when they're on Switch. So,
I mean, you bought a PS4 to play one of the Game of the Year contenders, and there's another one coming up. I got the Game of the Year
bug. You need to try them out. I think that for a 2D platformer to be bold enough to have a story and characters that you actually care about and are interesting and at times amusing is pretty awesome when you think about the vast majority of 2D platformers. I think for those reasons, this game really stands apart. I could have seen a situation where the mechanics and the platforming is so solid that this could have easily just been a package of tough mini levels. And I think people would have said it was a good game, but maybe not a truly great game in the same way that a lot of feedback has been, in the way that it's been so positive. I think I've only played the first 5 chapters just because I've been pretty busy. Even though I've been away, it's just sort of loads of things happening, so I've only played the first 5 chapters. But in those 5 chapters, I've already had a real mix of dynamics with what this game is throwing at me. Like, there's been enemies that chase me, pure platforming levels where you're just getting from left to right. There's even Metroidvania elements, and what I mean by that is just kind of going between screens looking for specific keys and that kind of thing, which I really wasn't expecting in the game. And I like that the levels mix these things up, and each different levels introduce different characters that have their own background and stories. And I think the themes that this game goes for on issues around specifically anxiety, I think, is the biggest one they've hinted at so far. And some of those ideas...
It's just general, like, mental health stuff that they're leaning into throughout the game. Yeah.
Right. And really, Madeline's fight with herself a lot of the time.
Absolutely,
which I think is portrayed incredibly well. And the obvious comparison is like, oh, this is a game about anxiety and stress, and this is an incredibly anxiety-inducing and stressful game. I think
yes,
that is a great comparison, but it definitely goes a lot deeper than that, and I really respect this game for doing that. I don't know where the story's going to go. I'm fascinated about where the characters in the game end up, and I'm not sure if this game's necessarily worth a whole spoiler cast, but we could maybe have a spoiler quick discussion next time once I've beaten it, and I don't know if that's worth doing. But this game is just above and beyond what it needs to be, and I am loving every moment of it. And I mean, you could accuse me of saying, like, if you love it so much, why haven't you already beaten it? But I have been busy, and I kind of want to savor it, and I don't often say that about games, but it's a really great game where I might spend a day on a chapter, where the first chapter I think is like 20 minutes, and then I guess the 5th chapter took me about an hour and 20 minutes. So like, there's some really hefty, meaty chunks in there that take a long time to play through, and like I know that
it's funny though, because Celeste, despite the fact that those levels are so incredibly long and they take you time to figure your way through and get your dexterity and everything, it's a game that tremendously respects your time. In the way that, on Switch especially, you can just suspend anywhere. If you have collectibles that you're going after, you can go to that one point in the chapter, find the collectible, and literally leave the level, and you still have it collected. There are just so many elements that make it so convenient for the player if they want to do all the stuff that surrounds kind of the extra bonus things.
And those are just such great decisions. It feels like every decision made in this game just feels like a correct one.
Right down to all the accessibility stuff where you can change the speed that the game runs at, or make yourself invincible. Just like, if you find it too difficult, those options are there for you as well.
Right.
It really is made for as many people as possible.
And the theme that they say very early on that I really love is, like, the more you die, the better, because that's how you appreciate this game the most. I'm forgetting the exact line it says, but it justifies why dying in this game is a good thing. I think it says, like, it shows that your experience, or I don't know, I can't remember, but it felt quite motivational at that point in time. Got to give a shout out to the soundtrack.
Yes, it's so good.
There's something so incredibly Stranger Things about the soundtrack. There's
a lot of synth in there, isn't there?
It's synthy, 80s-esque, I guess you can argue, but still quite mysterious and creepy, and that just plays into the theme of some of the characters and plot points in this game tremendously well. I was really impressed at how it all just synergizes together, and that's completely irrespective of the fact that this is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, mechanically solid 2D platformers I've ever played. I think that I have played Meat Boy very recently, and as good as that game feels, there's something about Celeste that I prefer. I wouldn't say
it's to do with the sound design, it's to do with the animation. It's just very snappy, and like smart decisions they make around like hair color when it comes to jumping, and just the way everything is. It's a game feel design decision that is very cohesive in a way that is so satisfying, but also, you know, there are elements that you really need to keep in mind. Like, you're not going to be able to hang on to a ledge forever. You have a limited kind of stamina. So, you know, that the theme of climbing a mountain and having that be a part of the mechanics. And that was one of the things that took me a long time to get my head around. Was when I first started playing the game, I was not a big fan of the controls. It was pretty difficult for me to get my head around using the shoulder button to hang. But by the end, it's like second nature. And I think it's just such a smart addition. It's a very little thing that they've added, but the controls are so simple and the amount of things you can do are limited in terms of you don't get new abilities, but every level you go through throws something into the mix to change how you approach it.
And I actually think
how they add that variety.
That clinging and climbing mechanic is something that definitely stands it apart from other 2D platformers, especially something like a Meat Boy, where yes, there are a handful of levels in Meat Boy that I would argue felt slightly puzzly, and what I mean by that is that there's like a specific way you have to jump in order to make a jump.
Right.
I feel like there's a lot more of that in Celeste because of this climbing mechanic, and the fact that it's not just skill in terms of how good you are at platforming, it's skill in terms of how good are you at working out when to like cling and when not to cling, and when to use your double jump.
And I think I said this earlier in the year, but there are 2 stages to every single room in Celeste. The first stage is figuring it out in your head. How do you get to the other side? The second stage is actually doing it. And so I think that that's something that makes it stand apart even more. Is it is both a puzzle game and a platformer, but it's not a puzzle platformer. And I think that's very, very cool.
Yeah. And as I said, just mixing up the formula of levels, like there are some keys that you have to go and get, and Metroidvania elements, and different stuff that's not just wind, but also panels.
It's the environment that really changes around you, isn't it? It's like every single time you enter somewhere, there's a new thing to interact with, which changes the verbs and the way that you move around the world.
Yeah, completely. Like jumping through these, it's almost like gelatinous gloop.
Yeah, the blobs that kind of like take you on a certain direction, and you need to jump out of them. Yeah,
exactly. It's just, there's so many great things about this game, and it comes together in a package that is quite difficult to describe. And to anyone who hasn't tried this out yet on Switch, it's quite pricey. It's £18. I'm sure there'll be a sale eventually, but it's one of those few games that you can definitely justify by the fairly high price, even day one. And I know Hollow Knight's just come out for 11
quid. It's so good as well in terms of the amount of stuff it offers. I spent over 35 hours with Celeste, and I did every single thing that I wanted to do, and I still have stuff I could, like I didn't get all the strawberries, for example, but I did every difficult level in that game. I mean, honestly, I think getting all the strawberries won't be that difficult considering the stuff that I did. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sort of getting the ones I can along the way, but not.
And I was doing them because I found the platforming challenge fun, and I like the idea that the strawberries don't actually unlock anything, that they're just there to incentivize you to do a little platforming challenge, and you don't have to use it. Like, it's not a Donkey Kong Country where you have to get the Kong letters to unlock a secret level. You can get those secret levels by doing other things, and it's, I think it was smart to make them just, hey, this is an incentive for doing this thing that makes you feel accomplished.
Absolutely. And I'll hopefully try and beat it for next time, but really, really enjoying it so far. That's Celeste. You gotta get on that one.
It's amazing.
So E3 happened last week, and there was a stealth drop. I say stealth drop; it was the most obvious stealth drop I think there's ever been.
Everyone saw it coming.
Of course, Fortnite came to Switch, so I downloaded it. I do have friends in the PS who own PlayStation 4s who've been dying for me to play Fortnite for ages, and they'll be very frustrated that I just downloaded it in a heartbeat on Switch and played it. But I mean, that's the console that I had with me at the time, so I picked it up. I got it for free, obviously, and I played 3 matches. And I think it was kind of easier to get into than I thought. I mean, when the start of the first match, I thought, what am I doing? Where do I go? What on earth is happening? But there's actually the map and the way that drops happen and you get weapons. I kind of understood it quite quickly. The map feels surprisingly big, but you have like a clear border and then a circle that represents an action area. And you know that when you're in the circle, you're more likely to get more items. So you start with no items, obviously. Well, you get like a hack thing, a pickaxe, I guess you could call it. And you think, right, I have to get items, so you might as well go to that circle. But you know that everyone's going to that circle. So you eventually encounter other enemies, but I think
you're misunderstanding the circle here, Bally.
Am I?
The circle doesn't mean there's more items in that area. The circle is the radius. What goes on in these battle royale games, in order to force people together, so that it's not just a game where someone hides in a room for an hour, they encompass a system that is basically a wall of death. So if you're inside the circle, then eventually, if you're outside of it, you're going to get murdered by this blue wall of plasma that walks towards you. So you need to be inside the circle, because otherwise the blue wall of plasma will just kill you. That's the purpose of it.
True, but I still felt there were more people going towards that circle straight away when they might not have needed to otherwise.
They do, because otherwise they're going to die. Like, that's the reason. The reason why more people are going to the circle is because they're going to die if they don't go to the circle. So naturally everyone gets pushed towards that area.
So yeah, I do like how it felt easy enough to get a very basic weapon and then engage with the enemy. And I thought that for a game that has so many players in it and that I've only just dropped into and have no idea what's going on was actually quite impressive. It's a cool art style, actually. It kind of looks nice. I don't know how much I could get into this game if I tried. I think that I guess if I played with you online, MBZ, and we could get into it a bit, it could be fun. But I think I had a good time. I think so. I don't know.
Did I have a good time? I don't know. Maybe.
And it sort of came down to that I had so much on my plate with E3 to catch up on that I just wanted to dip in and give it a go quickly. And I definitely probably should go back to it and give it a proper
I think it's actually a good game to just play while you're watching some E3 stuff in the background or listening to a podcast, because it's not like you're not absorbing any atmosphere. Like, I think it's actually, if you want to be good at it, then you should have headphones on, because you can hear people around corners and that kind of thing. But I do think Fortnite is far less about stealth and being tense, because that's what PUBG is built on. Like, PUBG is built on the more militaristic, like the guns feel really good, and the idea that there's a lot of camouflage and you can go prone in PUBG, which you can't do in Fortnite. You can just crouch in Fortnite. Fortnite is much more about the building aspect and using that to defend yourself and to get like high ground. And it's much more, it feels more arcadey and more fast paced. And so as a result, I think a lot of people gravitated towards it more. So it's this weird confluence of like, there are these Minecraft elements, and it's doing the Battle Royale thing, and it's free, and it has a colourful, approachable art style for all ages. So it just kind of hit the jackpot when it came to that stuff.
It also worked for me quite well, because there are definitely just a ton of Switch players who had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah, literally the first match I got into, someone was just standing still, and I just shot them, and they died. And that was great.
There were quite a few players I noticed who just still had that one pickaxe well into the match, and I would just walk up to them with my quite basic gun and still just annihilated them. And I sort of thought, oh, come on, let's... what's going on?
There are a lot of kids on Switch, Bally, playing.
So I'm not... I don't know. I when it comes to like a big online shooter sort of thing, I mean, Splatoon's where I like to invest that time. I don't know if I want to do this necessarily, but it'd be fun to just give it a go sometime. But
I've never been like, I like the idea of battle royale style things. I always wanted to play that Minecraft mod where you were doing Hunger Games stuff, and I thought that was a cool, neat idea. But that for me was more about like getting resources and like trying to hide, and less about the combat side of things. Whereas I think these games are far more focused on the gunplay and trying to use that to just take people down.
And I do think the battle royale idea is going to evolve and change, and
it definitely, yeah.
The idea of like vehicles and things like that. But I think like full on superhero kind of, we're all people from like Infamous and stuff just going up against each other in this open world and stuff like that, I think will end up coming in the next few years. I don't see why that's not the logical next step for this kind of game.
I mean, Thanos was in Fortnite.
Was in Fortnite.
And he was basically a superhero because you could fly up into the air and like slam people down with mega punches and like fire lasers at people. So I don't know, maybe Marvel is talking to some company, maybe even they're talking to Epic to do something to make that more permanent thing.
So
or to,
that's what I want to ask you about, MZ, is Epic. What do they own? Who are they? And
okay,
what other games are they going to do? Is Fortnite their one and only? Like, how does what? I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't, because despite having listened to years of podcasts where they've probably been talked about, it's all gone over your head. That's fine. Epic are a developer who, for the most part, have not made a lot of games recently, and that's mainly because they're in the business of engine development. They are the people who make the Unreal engine, which you will have heard of. Unreal is like one of the biggest engines in the world when it comes to video games. And so their main form of business, up until recently with this Fortnite success, has been licensing their engine, because millions of people around the world, developers and people, use the Unreal Engine to make their games. And so Epic make a killing on that stuff, because if they're using Unreal, then they are being licensed out by them.
Right.
They also were the people who made Gears of War. Epic were kind of the company that started that when Cliff Bleszinski worked there, and all Gears of War stuff.
They're also working on the new one.
No, so Gears of War is now being handled by Microsoft. They have a company called the Coalition, which is the company that works on Gears of War, and they make all the new Gears of War stuff. So Epic no longer does Gears of War. So they basically, they're just doing Fortnite now, and they also obviously have that engine stuff. But that's kind of what Epic has been for the last decade or so. It's been like Gears of War, and also they bought Chair, who are the people who made Shadow Complex. And Shadow Complex was the kind of Metroid style game that came out in the Xbox 360 generation that I played, I think, a couple of years ago, and was very underwhelmed by, because people always said, oh my god, like, because Shadow Complex was one of the first indie Metroidvanias that had come out.
Right.
And it was more kind of militaristic, kind of using real guns and stuff, but it had some robots and things in it as well. When I played it, it was the remastered version, and I was pretty unimpressed by it, honestly. I just didn't think it held up very well. So yeah, they own them, and that's about it at the moment. Fortnite is just the biggest thing for them right now, so that's what they're doing. But hey, there's your history lesson on Epic. They mainly do that stuff. So yeah, and I played a few matches as well, Fortnite, on the Switch. What I'll say is it's not the platform I would want to play that game on if I had the choice. The 30 frames per second definitely hurts it. It's really cool to play it portably, and I enjoyed picking it up and playing a couple of games, but it felt a little bit laggy. It didn't feel very responsive, and in a game where it's all about survival and like getting hits in, and you're also playing against people on potentially Xbox and PC, which is a thing we can talk about in our E3 segment about the whole Fortnite news, because I think that, honestly, that has dominated conversation more than maybe anything at E3 has. The idea that someone 60 FPS with a mouse and keyboard on PC could play against me 30 FPS with my sticks on my Switch, playing it in my hand, it probably not going to lend in my favor, is it? You know, and obviously it's the same with the mobile version. They're going to be at an inherent disadvantage, but it's cool that they're doing this crossplay stuff, and I think it's awesome. I just think that if you're going to be competitive at Fortnite, Switch is not where you're going to be playing it. But it's fun, and it's a good game to just pick up when you have a couple of minutes. Much easier to do that on Switch than any other platform, honestly. So, over your lunch break, do a round, whatever, you can do that. And it holds up. I think I'm actually pretty surprised at how good it looks, how the art style has transferred over to the Switch.
Yeah.
I haven't actually played it on a TV yet, so I don't know how it runs in that mode. But portably, it's pretty good. Maybe better than I thought it would be, but also, obviously, it's still lacking in areas because it's a Switch version of a big third-party game. But hey, it's still the biggest game in the world right now. So Nintendo are very smart to get it on their system, and also very smart to try and capitalize on this idea that Sony are being fucking assholes about all this crossplay stuff. So yeah, I think it's going to work out in the end. But anyway, that's the main stuff you've been playing, right, Bally?
Yes.
Okay. So myself, again, having nowhere near as much time as I used to, working a job now and doing all that stuff means that I'm trying to burn through games on my weekends. And so last weekend I did that for a game that I had started a long time ago, which is Persona 4 Dancing All Night. Do you like Persona 4? Maybe you'll like this game, I don't know. It's basically a game on the Vita that is using the characters from Persona 4, and they're now doing a dancing game. And it's weird because it has a story mode. Dancing games, I don't think they're very well known for having story modes. Like Guitar Hero had one.
What's a dancing game without a dance mat is what I want to know.
Exactly, yeah. Well, so I would say it's better to call this a rhythm game than a dancing game, despite the fact the idea is that it's dancing. But the way it works is that the songs play and you have 3 buttons on the right-hand side of the Vita and 3 buttons on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you have triangle, you have circle or square. I never know which one is which. It's whichever one's
on the right.
Yeah, so it's triangle, circle, and X. And on the other side, you have the up button, the left button, and the down button. And these 6 buttons are used to do all your inputs. So basically what happens is stars will shoot out from the center of the screen towards one of these 6 buttons, and there's icons around the side, so 3 icons on each side, and like Guitar Hero, when it hits the kind of center point, you need to hit the button. So it's basically using these 6 buttons to play these games, and they're all done in rhythm and that kind of stuff. And it's okay. I think it's fine as far as a rhythm-based system goes. It gets pretty tricky, and I think it's kind of hard to keep track of because you kind of have to have your eyes focused in the center. And the reason for that is sometimes things will come out to the left side, sometimes to the right, and you can't really have your eyes on both at once. So it's sort of a take yourself back and look at the bigger picture style thing and try to focus in when they get close to the point you're supposed to hit them so that you can get a perfect as opposed to a great or a good, for example, because you want to get as many perfects as possible, get high scores, all that good stuff. And I liked a lot of the songs that they did. A lot of the soundtrack for Persona 4 is just phenomenal, and I absolutely adore it. I don't like a lot of what they've done with some of the tracks in terms of like synthing them up a little bit, making them a bit more like clubby style dance numbers, because I think the original versions are so good. But I do understand that they would have had to make changes in order to have those work in this setting. Like some stuff that is kind of quiet piano tunes, I don't think has the same like tap to the beat rhythm that you would need, and so they have to add drums and stuff in there to make it a little more appropriate for this style of game. And yeah, so that stuff is good, but like it's weird because there's not a huge amount of that when you're playing through the main story, because the story is essentially a visual novel. And the idea is that Rise, who is one of the characters from the original game, she is an idol. She's like a pop singer, basically, and she comes to your small town and stuff, and you become friends with her, and blah, blah, blah. But she is going back on the track, and she's like getting back into it, and there's this other idol group called Kanamine Kitchen, and there are all these other girls, and you basically have to do a thing where everyone gets all sucked up into a magical world, and you have to save everybody, basically. It's very kind of basic, very Persona-esque type of story. And it's not the most interesting. Unfortunately, they didn't get the original voice actor for Rise back, so no Laura Bailey, which makes me very sad. But it's really strange because, so as someone who now watches the show Critical Role, which I've talked about before, I now am very familiar with the voices of every voice actor on that show. And so every time they appear in a game, it kind of throws me out a little bit now because I can just recognize, like, I was playing Layton 3, and in Layton 3, there's this one character who has this kind of Britishy accent, and I instantly knew it was Liam O'Brien because he does a Britishy accent on Critical Role. And so it just instantly, I'm like, that's Liam O'Brien. And I'm not even thinking about this character in the game anymore. I'm just thinking about the voice actor instead. So Teddy in this game is played by Sam Riegel, who is, on Critical Role as well. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh, this is weird. And now I'm hearing these voice actors talk to each other who I watch on this Twitch show instead. And it just gets very strange in my head. But yeah, so it's disappointing that Laura Bailey's not back, but maybe that would have messed with me even more because then we would have had her and Sam talking to each other and I would just not be able to pay attention to what's actually going on. Not that I need to pay attention to what's going on because the story is kind of not super interesting. There is a twist or two, but I generally think it goes on too long. And as someone who really enjoyed sitting there and soaking in all the voice acting and everything in Persona 4 Golden, I actually found myself by the end of the game skipping a lot of it because a lot of the text wasn't necessary. It was very fluffy. And it wasn't really telling me much that I didn't already know, so it was just kind of beefing things out for no reason. So I was skipping a lot of the VO because I was reading it faster than they were reading it, essentially. And yeah, so I played through the whole thing, and I think this is one of those games that I would never recommend to anyone who has not played Persona. Like, you have to have familiarity with the characters and actually care about the universe to play this, because I don't think the game is particularly amazing in any way. It's a fun enough rhythm game, and it's an okay enough story, but for people who aren't invested in this universe, it's going to do literally nothing for you, unless you like the songs enough to where you just want to go in freestyle mode and just play it a bunch, which that was never my intention. I didn't buy this to play it as a rhythm game. I bought it because I knew there was a story mode in it, and that was maybe a little bit underwhelming. So anyway, I'm glad I've gone through it, but you know, I'll just wait for the next mainline Persona, I think, because it didn't really do a huge amount. So other than that, I, this weekend, have been banging my way through Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, which was the second game that you made me do the fortune cookie thing on Backloggery, which first we got a Castlevania game. It is, yes. Yes, this is the last DS Castlevania game, and I'm very much close to the end now. Order of Ecclesia is very different, and it's a little bit weird. So you play as a female main character, which is very cool. I think her name is Shanoa. And essentially what you have this time is, instead of buying weapons or finding weapons, every weapon you get is a thing called a glyph. And you can get them from defeating enemies. Like, you absorb the soul of the enemy, essentially. It's kind of like a random drop. But the weapons use up your MP. So every time you swing a sword, your green bar will go down a bit, which is a weird mechanic, and I'm not really quite sure why they implemented it, because to me it just puts an artificial limit on the weapon that you're using, which normally in a Castlevania game, you're just going to be spamming it anyway, and that's kind of what I'm doing in this game as well. But it was a little strange to see that and to have that as a more of an inconvenience than anything else. You can have a weapon in each hand, and so sometimes you can do combos, like having a double rapier will let you do very quick kind of movement, so you can get a ton of hits in at once. And I haven't really found any other combos, because that's the first one the game tells you about, but apparently if you kind of mix them up, they will maybe go fast together, or they'll create some sort of effect. But the idea that your bar is being used is weird, because you don't go and collect stuff to refill it. It just refills on its own. So it's more a case of I feel like it's perhaps they don't want you to really spam weapons very quickly, because you can do that with certain combo moves. So in order to stop you from just being a speed demon and destroying enemies, they put the limit to where you have to wait until your bar fills back up to attack again. And maybe that's why. But to me, it seemed a little strange. It wasn't something that I was kind of super into. It's been okay. Like, it hasn't been a huge hindrance, but I just find it a strange mechanic that doesn't really serve a great purpose in my mind. That said, the rest of the game is also a little bit strange, because as opposed to having one big castle that you go through and you have the grid-style map and you do all that, you have a world map that has all these different places, and every area you go to is a much more like smaller contained place that you kind of go from left to right, and there's an entry point and an exit point. And once you find the exit point, it spits you back out to the world map, and you can go back to town where you can save your game, or you can move on to the new area. And so it creates these scenarios sometimes where I'm dying really badly, and in a normal Castlevania game, it would be all about just finding the save room. Whereas in this one, there are save rooms, but also if I'm close to the end of an area and I can just get out of it, if I get out in time, I can just warp basically from the world map back to the home village and just quickly save there, which makes things like getting poisoned when I don't have any anti-venom to heal myself very helpful, because there was one moment where I was poisoned and I was running away. I had like 13 health left and I just exited the stage, and I enter the village and I'm still poisoned and it's ticking down, so I'm like running towards the save point and I barely just make it to the save point in time and stay alive. And so that's kind of neat that it can create those scenarios, but it is very fractured. It feels weird as a Castlevania game, because the chests that you get as well are pretty much randomized, and I think the reason for that is that you now have side quests. So in this village, you're basically... So as you go through all these areas, you'll sometimes come across people who have been frozen, and you have to defrost them by using your glyph powers to, like, absorb whatever. And then the villager will be like, oh, thanks for saving me. You can find me in town now. So every time you save a villager, you add someone to your town, and they may be a shopkeeper who sells clothing items to help your defense, or, you know, some healing things, stuff like that. So you are basically building out this town as you go through all these sections by finding villagers. And so, yeah, you're essentially doing that, and every time the villagers come back, they will have side quests for you. It'll be like, collect a ruby, a sapphire, and an emerald, and you can find these randomly in chests around the world. So it's not like you need to go to one specific place to get these quest items. You're just generating them, you know, as you go back through, which I'm not a big fan of. I don't like randomized loot. I think it's a little bit annoying, and you can never directly do what you want. You can never, like, follow a guide to be like, this is where you need to go to get this. So... Right. Little bit annoying on that front, but I didn't really engage with the side quest that much anyway, because it didn't seem like the rewards were really worth it. I was buying a lot of kind of my items and my upgrades, so that wasn't a big thing. But yeah, so it's strange. It doesn't feel like a Castlevania game. There are just a lot of elements in there that are a little different and weird. Thankfully, again, it doesn't have any weird touchscreen stuff, and the DS screens are used very well in terms of having the top screen be a map and the bottom screen be where your main kind of play is going on. And I basically have blasted my way through to the end. I'm now at Dracula's castle, and I'm almost at Dracula himself, so I'm basically done with it. But I think that this is one of the games I've enjoyed least in the series. It just doesn't give me the same thing that I want, because there's less exploration going on. When you have these smaller areas, it's far more about survival and getting to the next checkpoint and getting to the next save point than it is about going around and finding secrets and exploring and filling out a kind of map, you know? That's the thing that really draws me to the Metroidvania style games, is filling out maps and finding areas and the discovery. And when it's far more focused on the combat and, you know, just taking people down and trying to stay alive, doesn't engage me as much. So anyway, pretty much done with it. I'll probably finish it tonight. And then I'll be done. And then once I've done that, I will have played every single Castlevania, Metroidvania game from Symphony of the Night all the way through the 3D GBA games.
This is the last one.
Yes, I've done all 3 GBA games, all 3 DS games. This is the last one. My conquest is finally over. I can't remember when I started doing this, but it's pretty...
N64?
No, that doesn't count. That's not a 2D. You can no. Castlevania 64 can fuck right off. I think it's.
Is that the only 3D attempt?
No, like Lords of Shadow. So Lords of Shadow was a PS3 360 game. They did Lords of Shadow 2. There have been other games. I think there was actually a 360 game that was like Harmony of Despair, maybe is what it's called. And I think that might, of the Moon, of the Symphony of the Night. I think that one might be one of these style games. I'm not 100% sure. But my main goal to do this was to do Symphony of the Night and then do all the Nintendo handheld games. And it feels pretty cool to have done all of that and have done it all chronologically as well.
Yeah.
That's like a goal that I've had for myself for certain series. Is like, I want to play everyone in the series, but I've never done it where I've started at a starting point and ended at a finishing point, having done them all chronologically. So I feel pretty happy with myself that I've now done that.
Do you have a favorite, or is that favorite also the same one you'd recommend I try, considering I've still not tried one yet?
Yeah, I think I could do a ranking. I would say my ranking goes, so number 1 is Symphony of the Night. I still think it is so iconic. It is so brilliant.
Can I play that on PS4 then?
You probably can't, because they don't do PS1 games on PS4 for some stupid fucking reason. So I can't actually believe Symphony of the Night has never been on a Nintendo platform, but they should put that shit on the Switch. My God, Konami, what the fuck are you doing? Well, we know what the fuck they're doing. Nothing.
Not much.
Not much. So I would say Symphony of the Night still number 1. I would say my number 2 is Portrait of Ruin, which is the one I played before this. The one with kind of the Mario 64 jumping in paintings. I really loved that. I thought that was excellent. Super, super cool game. Third, I would go Aria of Sorrow, which is the GBA game. Fourth, I would say Harmony of Dissonance, which is the second GBA game. Fifth, I would say probably Dawn of Sorrow, which is the DS game with touchscreen stuff. Then sixth, I would say, is this one I've just played, Order of Ecclesia. And seventh is Circle of the Moon, which is the first GBA game. So I'd say that's my ranking. Maybe Order of Ecclesia would go last. I could switch with Circle of the Moon, depending. Both are not particularly great. But yeah, that's kind of my ranking. That's how I would go. Very happy to have done that. It's a cool thing. So I'm done with Castlevania Bally for now, until Bloodstained Ritual of the Night comes out later this year, which is just going to start anew. So we're going to hopefully get a lot of Bloodstained games over the years, but we shall see. But in any case, that is going to close us out for the first segment. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this break. Alright everyone, welcome back to the show. We are going to talk about some more E3 stuff. Just wrapping things up a little bit, noting our predictions, talking about the other guys, what everyone else had to show at E3. How do we feel now, removed from it a little while, and all that good stuff. So, Bally, let's kick things off by just going through our predictions and seeing how completely and utterly wrong we were.
I think those who listen to our pre-E3 show, our predictions show, will probably know that we didn't do too great this time. I think in the past years we've scraped a couple of points here and there, but
maybe
this might be an entire whitewash. But very quickly, I thought that Smash was going to include Banjo-Kazooie. It's going to be mentioned at the Microsoft press conference. I thought that Spring Boy would appear in the Direct. I think there'd be the new mystery Pokemon from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee would be in Smash Brothers, and I thought Lara Croft was going to be there too, and none of that happened, even the really safe ones. I also went for Star Fox Grand Prix being real. thought the leaks looked legit. They still might be legit.
They are legit. I am convinced that game is real.
Yeah,
like,
I'm
there's
convinced
nothing
as
to
well.
say it isn't real to me. I just think Nintendo weren't ready to show it yet. So
Exactly, but I mean, we've gone for another E3 without finding out what Retro is working on officially.
I can't fucking believe how long it's been that we still haven't seen Retro Studios game.
So
it's getting silly now.
I predicted the whole Samus gunship being in the game. No mention of the game. So final prediction. Well, two more predictions very quickly. I thought there'd be a 3D Zelda tease about a game next year, and I'm gonna stand by and say that there will be a Zelda game next year. I just don't think it's going to be the 3D one like I predicted. It's probably much more likely to be the 2D one that comes out quite quickly. I thought Mario would be in somehow. Galaxy 1 and 2 remake, most likely to be on Switch for this year. That Mario was completely void of that conference direct, which was...
Hey, that was Mario Party, man.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
Party.
And I thought there'd be Nintendo characters in Fortnite on Switch, which wasn't the case.
Nope.
MZ, you went for Prime Trilogy and a Metroid Prime Hunters remake on Switch. Didn't happen. Ribbon Girl, Springman, Simon Belmont, and a Rabid to be in Smash Brothers. Didn't happen. Phil Spencer.
I think Rabid Peach is probably the one I would go with, actually. Rabid Peach seems to be the one from Mario plus Rabbids that gets the most.
I think we're still gonna get a handful before this game's out. I feel it, but
I do think it probably would just be the Rabid, but the costumes would be like Rabid Luigi, Rabid Peach, Rabid Mario, probably.
Yeah. Phil Spencer was going to come out of the Smash tourney, and we watched the Smash tourney. I watched all of it.
It was good
really
fun.
Enjoyed it. But no announcements, and then around the game to do the tourney.
Yeah, I was like, there must be an announcement at the end here because Sakurai came out on stage. Yeah. Like, why would you bring Sakurai out on stage if you're not going to do some drop?
It had all the feel of like there's going to be an announcement. It feels right, but it just didn't happen. And then you also predicted Metroid 3DS Fusion remake, which 3DS completely abandoned from this direct, which was another interesting point. But yeah,
definitely.
No points for us, but it was...
We can still dream and wish.
A lot of stuff rumoured, less announced, we might say, so...
Pretty much, yeah. So, I don't know, let's maybe talk about Nintendo's Direct after a little bit of time.
After the rest of the media's reacted.
Yeah, how do you feel about it now, Bally? Do you feel as positive on it, or are you cooled a little bit more?
I'm not that positive about it. I think it's very... I feel very conflicted because you can't underestimate how great Smash looks and is going to be, and how awesome Ridley in that game is. But you need to step back and accept that Ridley in the game is one announcement within a game, and they're just... For me personally, as like a Nintendo fan, there just wasn't enough games that I'm interested in coming out anytime soon on the Switch, and... That's just going to happen based on last year. I think this was more likely to happen than I think I was anticipating, and I should have realized that, even though it is the second year of the Switch and you think that they want to build the momentum. But I mean, when we're talking about in terms of sales and what's coming out this year and what will appeal to a mass audience, we have Smash Brothers and Pokemon coming out on Switch this year. That's going to be absolutely huge. I have no concern about the Switch selling well and those games selling well. My only concern is the number of games that the critical media will play on Switch this year that they enjoy versus other systems, whereas last year I think that ratio was much better.
Yeah, well, last year was an anomaly, I think, in many respects for Nintendo. They planned it very well so that they could have big tentpole titles released every month, and this time they do kind of have that, but they are far more relying on ports and games that are not as significant. Like, I think Mario Party is an example of a game that we feel like it's not a super big deal, but it may do quite well for them. Like, I'm sure because it's the Switch and because it's the first Mario Party on Switch and because Switch is so popular, it's probably going to do a few million units, you know? Like, it'll probably do way better than the last few Mario Parties. And that's just because it's a more social system. I think people are much more likely to get together and play their Switches together. So I think more people will just pick it up to have on there, to be like, for gatherings, for things when this will happen. Obviously, it still doesn't have online. Apparently, it has an online mode in it for certain mini games. Did you get more information about that, Bally? Because I know you're talking about that.
Yeah, my only understanding was that it was to play certain mini games online, and that it's definitely nothing board related online. Is all I know.
So not the actual mode that you want to play.
Yeah, basically.
Well, I mean, like, in the past, I remember you playing, like, some Mario Party 6 or 5, where there was, like, a hockey mini-game or, like, a volleyball.
Yeah, there was hockey and beach volleyball. We played a ton of that at university and had a really, really good time, especially the ice hockey. That was so good.
Huh. Yeah, I remember you trying to get me to play that stuff and me being like, "No, I'm bad at these sports games. Don't make me play these, Bally. I just suck." But
that happened quite a lot in our childhood.
Yeah, a little bit too much. So yeah, a game like that is one which is, hey, that's October's game. To me, it doesn't stand out as like this big thing that people should be paying attention to. But Mario Tennis is going to come out, or has just come out recently. I'm not even sure which is which, but I know the reviews went up and people are relatively positive on it. That's a game that in the past would have been a B-tier kind of ignored thing, and I think Nintendo have done a good job of, because they are having these releases scheduled out to be more tentpole-esque, it's been pushed to the forefront much more, and it's like, okay, here is the game for this month on Switch. For the summer, you're going to play some Mario Tennis. You know, tennis is a thing that people do in the summer, so that's what's going on.
And it's been promoted hugely with like those Nadal adverts.
That Nadal trailer
like, wow.
we watched together, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I couldn't believe how high production value it was, and the length it was, and everything. It was something that, like, this is Nintendo-like money being thrown around, not the Wii U era where they were doing bollocks to Ultra Smash.
And that's just as Nadal won the French Open, so like got him at a really good time. That's just a huge... they've really put a lot of effort behind that game, and the way they've marketed it, and as much as I'm not liking that game, I totally understand that there's a lot of people out there who played the demo and are really hyped about that game.
Yeah. So... it is weird because like we're coming out of this Direct with all the Smash stuff, which we love, of course. But if you look at it holistically and step back, really the biggest first-party announcement was Super Mario Party. And it's weird because it doesn't show a lot of confidence, but at the same time, I do wonder about E3, and I do wonder about how Nintendo views E3. About what its importance is to them as a company, because we know that they spread their announcements out, and they've done in the past. They've had January directs that felt more like E3s than just regular directs.
They've had the Switch came out and was released without even being shown at E3. So like, surely they have. It's not their top. It's a priority, but not a top priority, and they have the ability and flexibility to reveal games and get hype going outside of that one slot every year, and they've shown it in the past.
I think it's a lot more to do with the fact that they now don't have to panic anymore. Like in the Wii U era, they announced all these games at once, and it took a lot of them many years to come out because they weren't selling anything, and they needed to have things that people knew were coming out, so everyone was excited about the system. And it didn't work, and unfortunately, they blew their load, and so they didn't, they kept coming back to these games that were announced years and years in advance. Whereas now, they're much more in a situation where they can do a quick turnaround, Like, we didn't really know about certain games before they were about to come out. Like, before the Switch launch, we had never heard of ARMS, and it was out 3 months later, So stuff like that they can do now, and they're able to be like, well, it may not look like we have anything coming up later in the year, but how about we just shadow drop this game right now after this Direct? And it's there, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that existed, and now it's only coming out in a couple of months, or something along those lines. And I think that is very possible. Like, could they have shown Pikmin or Animal Crossing at this E3? Sure, they probably could have done that. Could they have shown this Star Fox Racing thing? Probably. But I think in their minds, it's much more a idea of getting the marketing push and the announcement close enough to release that they can benefit from it. So they can be like, hey, look at this cool new thing, this Star Fox Racing game in, say, a January Direct next year, and hey, it comes out in March. And is that a better proposition to the consumer for Nintendo, considering the wider audience now that they have?
Right. Yeah. And I think that the critics that do the good old columns about who won E3, what's gonna like that, who winning E3 by judging by like how a company does in their pocket, it isn't. It's important at rallying a base to a degree, but there's much more important, bigger challenges facing these companies, and I think Nintendo just caught up very quickly and realized, well, got ahead of the competition, I guess, and realized that it's not the be all and end all. And yes, they will probably have quite a strong 2019. E3. I'm sure it's probably not going to be quite as big as we're anticipating at this stage, but they've just decided that that's how it is, and I think it'll suit them.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think this is cause for concern, because I think a lot of people are ringing the alarm bells and like, oh, Nintendo are doomed again once more. They have shown nothing and they have no games in their pocket. And it's like, well, boy, we've seen this song and dance a lot of times, haven't we? Of people saying this over and over again.
And like they might have had a weak E3, but we still know that they're working on Yoshi, Metroid Prime 4,
Sure.
Bayonetta 3. Like, there's so many games we know are coming that they just didn't show, and the fact that they weren't shown is neither here nor there versus the fact that we know that they're working on them, which I think is a big jump compared to the Nintendo we knew 4 or 5 years ago.
Definitely, but also, you know, we know that they can get larger third-party things that are not as compromised. Like, look at Fortnite on Switch, for example. That just came out, and honestly, that's probably one of the biggest things that has happened around E3, because we talked about it a little bit in the first segment, but this whole Sony not allowing crossplay has really blown up in the favor of both Microsoft and Nintendo. Like, you see on Twitter, their accounts going back and forth, being like, hey, you want to play Fortnite later and shit like this. And, like, the cross-promotion that's going on between them and the partnership. And even Phil Spencer, you know, he was on Giant Bomb's couch, as he is every year. One of the best parts of E3, I think, is Jeff talking to Phil Spencer. And he was talking about, like, he just went and had lunch recently with the Nintendo guys because they're a big third party on Nintendo now because of Minecraft. And the idea that these two companies are working together to bolster each other while Sony is kind of off in its arrogant old corner right now is only working wonders for Switch at the moment. Like, they're getting very positive word of mouth because, hey, the most popular game in the world, you can now play it on the bus. And also, you know, you can play it with PC people and Xbox people, but you can't play with PlayStation. And the negativity that is being going over to Sony's side, it's all become positive PR for Nintendo, you know? And they haven't really had to do anything about it. Kind of reminds me to some degree of the Xbox-Sony situation of 2013. It's very weird that we are, again, in this place where the lead competitor is arrogant and hubristic. Who would believe that the cycle continues to repeat itself? But hey, there you go, it's video games. We're never going to learn from history, are we?
Yeah, like, isn't that the case that every single time a console has gotten ahead by like some way, they never seem to build on that lead the next generation? No. There's always a comeback, like, always. And
yeah, it seems like every single time we reset generations, a different competitor has now taken the top spot. So no one's ever gonna be in a place where they just hold on to it.
Shall we talk about Microsoft then, as we're kind of
so as we kind of move into this conversation, let's maybe discuss some of the other things that went on at E3, some of the other conferences, some of the things that we enjoyed. Bally, what was it from Microsoft this year that stood out to you?
I mean, a lot of the games that they announced and things that were coming didn't appeal to me personally. So stuff like Gears of War, Halo Infinite. I must say Forza Horizon 4 looked fantastic, and that is something that, having just bought a PS4, I'm kind of like, that looks real good.
As a driving fan, like, Forza Horizon is the thing that I think you would enjoy the most.
Right, exactly. And that would look like a fantastic game, but justifying buying a whole other system just
Exactly.
PS4 to get that one game, I don't know.
I will say it has an unfair advantage because you can drive around Edinburgh, so it just makes...
I mean, that makes it awesome, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. That is insane.
I think Edinburgh's had a good year with Infinity War and with Forza.
Forza.
all of us who know Edinburgh are like, wow, we're getting so much love this year. It's crazy.
So much Edinburgh. I think the one that excited me the most isn't obviously exclusive, and that's Cyberpunk 2077, which so many people are talking about. And for Microsoft, it wasn't about, hey, this is what we have now that's going to get us back in the game necessarily. There was an awful lot of, this is what we have coming and what we're working on, all the way to the level of, we've just bought 5 developers, right? So
yes, absolutely.
And I believe Sony had a similar announcement a long time ago at E3. I mean, there's been announcements here and there about buying developers, but there was this idea that a long time ago, Sony was like, we're going to buy all these people, and then they're going to work on all these exclusive games. And you feel that that's what Microsoft were going for this time, and that maybe they're not giving up on this console generation. I'm not saying that, but they're making sure that they still have an amazing lineup at the start of the next generation. Whenever
they are preparing for the future in a way that I think, when it comes around to the next turn, and Microsoft have done all these positive consumer first initiatives with Game Pass, with backwards compatibility, with PC stuff just being on their day one, it really puts them in a place where they are coming out strong for the next generation.
Right. And what's important is that a lot of people say, oh, well, some of the best announcements at Microsoft's press conference, they're not exclusive, so why does that matter? It's like, right, but someone like CD Projekt Red could quite easily have gone to someone else like Sony and said, hey, you can show off Cyberpunk 2077, but they actually chose Microsoft, even though they're not doing too well in this current console war. Like, that shows, in my view, like a ton of confidence in what Microsoft have to offer down the line. And you can say that about a lot of the announcements. It's like all these developers have a lot of faith in Microsoft and showing their games off at Microsoft's press conference. You can talk about that with Fallout, for example. It's Fallout 76. Which is going to be huge later this year, as much as we don't really care much about that series. But that's going to be an absolutely huge game, and it's obviously going to come on PS4. But for Bethesda to have the faith to show it off at Microsoft's press conference shows that no one's counting Microsoft out in any sense of the word whatsoever. Like, they're just not leading the way right now.
Yeah. You could also potentially say that Microsoft is a big stage, and so despite the fact that, you know, they could be on Sony, I think that some companies are just like, hey, you know, Microsoft has a spot for us, we should take this because we may stand out amongst a crowd potentially. So you could look at it that way and be a bit more cynical about it, but I do think that in the past, CD Projekt have had a relationship with Microsoft. Witcher 3 was originally shown off at their press conferences as opposed to Sony's. Right. So they've had a kind of relationship pre-existing, which I think probably has carried on through. And obviously the One X is still the most powerful console on the market right now. So, you know, if you're going to show your big popular game at a console manufacturer right now, Microsoft are the ones holding the keys to the kingdom. Also, hey, they own Windows, and CD Projekt Red are big PC people. Like, that's where the main platform is for their video games. So it does make sense to that degree as well. Yeah, I am also 100% on board with Cyberpunk. The things people are saying about that closed door demo at E3 are crazy, and it may be a little overhyped by the time that we maybe see it for ourselves. But right now, you know, I was a little bummed out when I heard it was first person, because I am not the biggest fan of that stuff.
It creates a tremendous amount of hype when it's not. I mean, we've obviously had that trailer, but when so many people have seen it in action and they're all so positive and you can't see it yourself, and you project all sorts of craziness with this cyberpunk world they've created, that you kind of think it's guaranteed to be slightly underwhelming when you eventually see it to some degree.
Yeah, that's kind of inevitable. But I do think that, look, this is the company that made fucking The Witcher 3, which is undoubtedly one of the best games ever made in my mind. So I have a good amount of faith in them. And I think that what they've been saying is, like, the reasons as to why they have gone first person, like, they have made a deliberate choice. And I think that it's something that, you know, I may not be super happy with, but I think it will probably serve the game better in the end because they've made the design decision for a reason. So I'm still excited to play it. Very pumped on that. The thing from Microsoft for me that was the big standout was Ori and the Will of the Wisps. As everyone knows, Ori
Do
and
we
Blind
know when
Forest,
that's coming?
one of my favorite games. They said 2019, I think, in the trailer. So next year. But like, I watched some gameplay on GameSpot and IGN and stuff, and the combat they've done with, like, you have swords and, like, javelins and bow and arrow now. They're really trying to add depth to that game in terms of that. There's, like, a grappling hook that seems crazy. All the new mechanics that were shown in that trailer looked fantastic to me. So I am so excited to play a sequel to that game because I think there are ways that they can completely refine it and make it so much better, even though I think that game in the first place is incredible. Yeah. Very, very excited for Will of the Wisps. That's probably, outside of Smash Brothers, my most anticipated game coming out of this show.
Cuphead DLC?
Yes, I keep forgetting about the Cuphead DLC, but holy shit, yes! Cuphead, such a good game. It was like my second favorite game of last year, so I think that I'm going to be playing that whenever that comes out. I can't remember if they said it was this year or next, but whenever Cuphead gets more stuff, I am on board 100%. That game is phenomenally good, so... Yeah, so Microsoft had so much that I forgot even... everyone's forgetting about this Cuphead DLC, and it's like, wow, who would have thought that would happen? But yeah, they had a lot to show. Then let's maybe talk a little bit about some other publishers. I can't remember who went next. Probably, we're not even going to talk about EA. I don't know what you thought about Anthem, but Anthem looked interesting.
Anthem could have been presented so much better, but my God, that the way that EA present... I've actually got to be in my bonnet about EA. And
do you now? Unlike everyone, lol.
I mean, I don't know. I'm coming at a different angle, maybe. And
okay,
I don't mean to talk about Andrea Renee again, but I do have an issue with someone who gives their opinions on video games frequently on the internet and has a very strong view on lots of things. Maybe not strong. I don't follow her closely, but obviously I know that she's a huge commentator on video games, and I personally do have an issue with these individuals being used as essentially spokespeople for companies like EA, and I just think there's a wealth of presenters out there who, while they might not be in the video game industry, you can still get them to present and be genuine about these games that they're talking about. And I just feel that there's a conflict of interest, hypothetically, with someone like Andrea Renee. And I didn't think there was when I went out and looked for it, there was a tiny amount of annoyance by this, but there really wasn't anything like as much as I thought there would be. And I thought that was a little bit concerning, personally. I don't know what your take would be.
I think we're just in a weird place, you know? And I think you have people like Greg Miller who, to some extent, does a lot of the same things, you know? He presented the Square Enix Final Fantasy 15 event, right? And so you could say, well, I'm not going to trust anything Greg says about Square Enix anymore because he's now been paid by them to do this event and he has hosted PAX panels for them in the past for certain games. But also, I know Greg Miller, you know, and I know that he is the kind of person who will speak his opinion. And despite the fact that you could say that there is unconscious bias in there somewhere, I still know who he is and what he thinks about certain video games. And I know that he was one who was like, yeah, actually, Final Fantasy 15, not for me. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't think it was very good. So
I agree, but I think Andrea Renee, I presume, will absolutely be the same.
She's someone who would drag EA over the coals for things.
Absolutely, and she gets so much positive feedback across the internet. It's not so much them; it's the precedent that. But who else? Like, there could be so many people out there who are doing, like, giving these and it's an unhealthy precedent. And as much as I trust Andrea Renee and Greg Miller, they should, in an ideal world, stay out of these things. In my view,
they
personally.
should, but people got to get paid, Bally. You know,
people got to get paid. I agree.
It's hard out there.
Yeah,
and, you know, they are very good presenters. They're really good hosts. That's the thing. Like, and it's hard to find people like that who are able to pull it off in such a seamless, easy manner. And, you know, sometimes I think I really like what Ubisoft does because they do get the developers out on stage. The last couple of years, they've really pushed for that. They didn't have Aisha Tyler anymore. Like, they're just doing the people who are making the games. And I think more companies should be doing that for sure.
Right.
But again, EA is not most companies. They really are out of touch. And I think, you know, that idea of having a host and having someone to run the show is still something that they want to lean on.
Yeah, and I'd be like, Andrew, are they like, don't taint yourself with this company. Just get as far away from them as possible.
But you know, like she hosted a Nintendo World Championship event before. You know, she's hosted all these other things. Yeah. So I think she's a host first and a critic second, and that's kind of how you have to look at it, potentially.
Sure.
But it also has to come from the consumer. It has to come from, are you going to take them at their word? For me, Greg Miller, I can take him at his word, and I feel like that is the case. Certain other people, depends on my familiarity with them. But, you know, I think they know what their ethics policy is, and they're very open about it, and they say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you that this company paid me to do this thing. You can take that with a grain of salt. You can not think my opinion is something that I'm giving truly, but it's all up to you. And I think that's what it is in this day and age. It's kind of up to us to decide how we feel about it. And if we don't like it, then we don't like it. But, you know.
No, and I totally get that. I just... And then in the phrase "in an ideal world," I think it's tricky to get there in the industry.
There is no ideal world, Bally. It is unfortunately.
It's not there right now. On EA, one more thing. Well, first of all, Anthem I thought was just presented horribly for what could be a very interesting game. It was like
bizarre. I remember listening to Austin and Patrick from Waypoint just talking about how they came out that demo and being like, dude, what the fuck? Like, you could fly and it was fucking cool, you know? Like, apparently the movement in that game feels fantastic and it looks like you're fucking Iron Man the whole time. It's pretty fucking crazy, but they didn't do a good job of selling it. Like, with CD Projekt Red, with Cyberpunk and all this stuff, that trailer was just, it was hot. Like, it was sizzling. And Anthem is just like, well, we could feel that way about it, but I just don't think they put it out there in a way that made people excited.
If you told someone like it's gonna be like Destiny, but you're gonna be in an Iron Man suit, I think anyone could create Anthem. You know what I mean? Like
I don't know that anyone could create Anthem. I think you need a huge amount of money to create something like that.
I mean, the idea, that world that they've created doesn't feel the most exciting when I think it could be so much more. But yeah, the way they presented it was just awful. I think that another thing with EA was, and I thought it was a really mean thing of, who's the CEO of EA? He's
Andrew Wilson.
Well, first of all, that guy comes across horribly, I think.
He comes across as literally an android. Like, he feels like a robot human.
He's awful, but I really didn't like that it was the guy working on Star Wars Battlefront who sort of came out with the apology on the all the shenanigans that went on with that game. Exactly. Take it, like, Andrew Wilson, come on, you're the big CEO. You can say something about Battlefront 2.
It was not the developers of Battlefront 2 making those loot box decisions. Right. It was the businessmen, and that is his decision. So
if you're the CEO, you're the chief businessman, you need to not put everyone else out for the chop when it comes to an issue like that. And to gain trust with people who are losing a lot of trust in EA, the best way of doing that is from the very, very top, personally. So that was shocking, I thought. And it was only reading online afterwards how that all unfolded. I was like, yeah, I agree, that is awful. But yeah, EA was interesting. There was some Star Wars game mentioned, which I don't even know. Oh, right.
Yeah, that was awful. Just talking to Vince Zampella, it was a very funny segment because Vince was like, I don't give a fuck. He was like, absolutely just like...
A lot of people thought he was just a random guy.
Yeah.
the crowd.
Yeah.
So
no, that's the dude who heads up Respawn, the Titanfall people, and they're making a Star Wars game. It's called Jedi Fallen Order, I think is what it was called.
sounds great.
Sounds great to me. Yeah, absolutely.
When we see it in 2040.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, one day. So yeah, EA. I didn't think there was much other than that was important for them.
The Champions League is now in FIFA.
Well, wow, what a crazy time we live in.
Can you believe it?
It's just like these innovations they keep bringing. When will they end, Bally?
You say innovation. Apparently, the license on Champions League just expired, and that's the only reason they have it anyway. It's not like this was the moment it was meant to come.
I think it's actually to do with Pro Evo, because I think they might have had the license before, and now that Konami are not doing that anymore, then basically EA owns all the football. So any football that ever exists, they have it. Bethesda, did you have anything from Bethesda you were interested in? It was probably the conference that I had the least stakes in overall.
The Elder Scrolls 6
Yeah, sure.
was the best part, I think. For me personally, I should say. And obviously there was nothing on that game. Starfield, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
That could be interesting, but
I mean, both of those are fucking Metro Prime 4 moments.
I know.
Where it's like, here's a logo, okay, goodbye.
So I was watching it live, and I could feel it was near the end. So as Elder Scrolls 6 comes, I'm like, oh my god. Like Caroline was next to me. I was like, Caroline, you'll want to see this. So I paused it. I'm like, Caroline, come see this. It's the next Elder Scrolls game, because she's loving Skyrim right now. So I'm like,
yes.
you won't want to miss this. Then she comes over and I press play, and then the screen just goes black. I'm like, oh, right, yeah. That was it. I'm sorry, but
just the logo. Yeah.
So it looked cool for what it was, but.
What do you mean it looked cool for what it was? It wasn't anything. That was a CG rendition of just any field. Anyone could have made that video. It was just a flyover of like a vague fantasy setting, and it said The Elder Scrolls 6. That was nothing. It was literally nothing.
Who was
Starfield?
Who was the dude who came out dressed as Han Solo, showing off?
Todd Howard.
Fallout. Tom Howard.
Todd Howard.
Yeah.
Todd Howard. He's basically the guy who heads up Bethesda Game Studios, which is who makes Skyrim and Fallout and all those games.
Yeah, I think that the whole Fallout 76 idea, if you're into that, is a cool one, and I'm sure that game is going to be talked about a ton later this year.
I really need to catch up on Danny's documentary on it, because he did one of those he did one on the history of Bethesda, which talks about Elder Scrolls and Fallout and all that stuff. And then another one that's on Fallout 76. So got to get to watching those when I get some time. But
and it was interesting that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to talk briefly about Wolfenstein Youngblood, which I thought was...
Yes, that's what I was literally just going to say. Is that was the thing that surprised me the most.
It's very surprising, and it's surprising they don't just want to go on to the third game, and they already want to do a spin-off just after the second. It's weird. And also, I've got loads of plot questions about if this is taking place in the 80s. Does that mean that's what's going to happen in the next game and all this sort of thing?
Well, so they did. So when New Order came out, which was the reboot of Wolfenstein, after that they did a smaller game that was more like a DLC that was also standalone called The Old Blood. And The Old Blood, I believe, was an alternate universe kind of spin-off type thing. So I think what Youngblood is an alternate universe type spin-off, so it doesn't bind them necessarily to that being where the story goes for Wolfenstein 3. Because I think Wolfenstein 3 will lead directly on from 2, because 2 sets up a sequel very clearly, and I think that will happen. But I think this game is just a standalone, shorter, smaller experience that is kind of alternate timeline thing. And Wolfenstein is very alternate timeline in and of itself, because it's all about the Nazis winning. So that was the thing that I was most interested in, because fucking loved Wolfenstein 2. Crazy ass game that is a lot of fun. So I want to play that. But yeah, nothing else from Bethesda really got to me. I'm not a huge Doom person, so Doom Eternal wasn't a big deal. But it's cool that they're doing another one of those, and people love that first game.
Rage 2?
Yeah, Rage 2 actually looked really good. Again, has a Doom-style look to it, Wolfenstein-style look. The id Tech kind of shooter has been in vogue with those two games, so I think Rage is probably going to do much better than it has any right to do. So that was another.
There was an awful lot of shooty this E3 generally that I.
Well, welcome to every E3 ever made by.
A lot of shooty, a lot of like the Division, Rage 2.
Yes.
Fallout. It was like woofed. Anyway, but
absolutely. I don't think Square Enix is worth talking about because they literally just showed things that had already been shown, and
I would say I like their format. I like that they're trying to do a direct.
It was tight, kind of short video presentation.
Very tight. I think I prefer the idea of at least having a presenter linking up occasionally, even though so it's not purely just a string of trailers, which is kind of what it felt like. As much as I still prefer that to a press conference, I just think that Nintendo have it down the best when it comes to just a little bit of pacing, so that it's not just back-to-back trailers, but it's still very compact.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like they have their little in-betweens, and sometimes Reggie will pop up and have a bit of a chat. So
a nice amount of Tomb Raider, but I mean that game is already got high hype levels. I don't know.
I don't know. Tomb Raider is not doing it for me in the same way that the last game did in terms of like pre-release stuff. It looks very similar, and that's great because I love those other two Tomb Raider games. But right now, it's not sticking out, and I think this year especially there was a lot of things that stood out. So it's hard when you're just another Tomb Raider game, you know. But I still love those games, so I'll still play it. You know, it's still a game I'm interested in. Sony, should we maybe do Ubisoft actually because they had some cool stuff. Yeah, so Star Fox, that was a big deal. That was I remember like seeing the one E3 related tweet from you was just like, what? And it was like as Star Fox and Starlink was happening, and I'm like, yep, I know exactly what that's referring to.
I mean, that was the best shock of E3 for me personally, on a like Nintendo fanboy level. I think definitely it was just. What is this? And I was like, oh, what game were they talking about again? Because I was already quite turned off from Starlink.
You were like super checked out on Starlink.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? Okay, we're flying around shooting, all right. What? Star Fox? What was it? Yeah, so that was very strange.
Are you going to buy those plastic ships and stick them onto your Joy-Cons?
I love the idea of Star Fox in my game, but I don't want to buy a ton of plastic to play it, and it feels like I have to. I think I don't know.
Don't buy it, Bally.
When I say I have to, I mean, is that the only way to play with Star Fox in the game, or can you buy it? You can just download the game without.
I think one of the things they were saying is that you don't actually have to buy the toys in order to get access to the content.
Okay.
So you could just buy a DLC thing of it instead of buying the toy itself.
Right. And that's cool. And that was actually one of my predictions for the year, if I may add. And you can maybe debate me on this, but my idea was that there would be a AAA game released cross. It would be announced at a non-Nintendo E3 announcement that would be across platform on the day and date, and I guess you could argue Starlink is that game.
I mean, that was already announced last year for Switch.
So Starlink.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
This game has been announced since last E3.
I was also going to say the other game at Ubisoft's conference. What's the motorbike one?
Oh, Trials.
Yeah,
there
we go.
Yeah,
that is Ubisoft, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's you can argue maybe that's not AAA in the same light, but
no,
that's
it's
also
not
cross-platform, which I thought. Anyway.
Yeah, because Trials is coming out on Switch. Yes, I forgot about that.
Which is
I
cool.
played some of Trials Fusion, got stuck on a thing that was like a tutorial that was you had to be able to do certain tricks to get past the tutorial. I just couldn't fucking do it, no matter how hard I tried. So I just refunded the game because I was like, I can't get past this. And it didn't let me skip it. And I was like,
did you look up a guide or something?
Yes, I was like, I can't fucking do these tricks. It's so hard. I literally had no idea what the fuck I was doing, so I refunded it. Trials is one of those games that I would like to play more of, and I hope it doesn't have stuff like that in it, this new one. But we'll see. The other thing from Ubisoft, of course, was Assassin's Creed, which it's set in fucking ancient Greece, so yes,
looks
son,
great.
I am way more interested in this video game.
Beyond Good and Evil 2?
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the fuck that game is still.
They showed a little bit of flying around and stuff like that.
Yeah, but what the fuck is that game? Like, right now it's just a tech demo of like, here's a big world.
I want someone to re-release Beyond Good and Evil 1 so I can play that game and understand what the hell is going on.
Yeah, I need to play it too. But I seriously think that you don't need to do that for this game because it seems honestly, if they took the Beyond Good and Evil 2 name away and called it something else, I don't think anyone would notice because there is no familiarity.
And it's basically a reboot with one character crossover
or a couple of characters,
and the same universe. So
yeah. I think it's a prequel, but I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, Assassin's Creed Odyssey looked great. I think that's an Assassin's Creed game that I will probably play.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely. Sony then had their weird thing where they took games journalists into a place that looked like the Last of Us place, and then they were like, oh, let's just shuffle them all out of here while we spend 15 minutes with Sid Schumann and Ryan Clements talking to
that
Sean
was
about
cool,
something.
but was it worth shuffling everyone in and out just to do that?
No.
Probably not.
No. It was very weird. Last of Us 2, though, looking insane in a way that, like, the animation and the AI and stuff is just on another level, quite frankly, to anything else that we've seen. So Naughty Dog just continue to be Naughty Dog and just push the boundaries. And Last of Us was a game that I didn't play because it felt like it was too tense for my puny little mind to handle. I think I might play Last of Us 2 at the moment. You know, I feel like I'm better at dealing with stuff like that. But
I'm getting better as well. Yeah, definitely. After the horrors of Uncharted 1, I'm getting there. I think I'm finally got the chops to go into a little bit of the horror.
Now that you have some zombie experience under your belt, yeah.
I've got it.
Potentially. Yeah, so that looked very good. And then Ghost of Tsushima was the other one for me that I was like, yeah, I love Sucker Punch.
I just looked at that and thought, is that still in this generation? Like, that game just looks crazy. Like,
it looks very good.
Looks incredible. I'm so baffled and don't know what to think about Death Stranding. I'm lost.
No, I'm actually far less interested in Death Stranding, having seen that piece of gameplay. I still don't know what it is.
Like, you carry around a little clone of yourself on... Oh, weird.
Bally, I don't know if you caught up, because I told you to watch the other trailers for Death Stranding, but if you should watch those other trailers, because they are far more entertaining and weird and esoteric than what they showed at this Sony thing.
Right.
Because, yeah, I have no idea what the fuck that is, but it's Kojima, and Metal Gear Solid 5, despite, again, having heavy problems in terms of its storytelling and some of its just terrible objectification and a lot of bad things in that game, one of the best playing video games I've ever played in my life. Just the feel of the stealth and the systems.
So you're still in for Death Stranding. You're just
I'm more tepid on it. I'm more tepid, but it still is a game that I'm interested in playing. So we'll see what happens. But
Spider-Man
pretty
looked
much
hot.
Spider-Man. I don't know. I feel like I'm less hot on Spider-Man than everyone else. I'm like,
really?
Looks like a big open world Spider-Man.
I just watched a ton of that cartoon growing up and know all of those villains, and I'm so in. And like, it feels like they're gonna get the Sinister Six, who's like they're like the six villains in Spider-Man all grouping together. But yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Anyway, that was E3. Any takeaways from this year? How do you find it was overall, Bally, just as a full package of an E3?
It's the first one that I really watched every single press conference in its entirety. That I think it's the first time I've done that in a long time, if ever. I don't know. There's a lot coming out that a lot of people are very, very hyped about that I just could not care less about. And
sure,
the thing,
I think that's just sensibilities for us personally. Like, we are not super into the big budget shooters. Like, a new Gears of War for those people is amazing. For us, it's like, okay, it's another one of those. Fallout 76, big online, kind of survival style game. Huge market for that style of game. Definitely not our type of game, you know?
And I think if I was going down that line, I don't know, I'd probably want to try Halo, to be honest. I think that's
that's the one that looked the most bright and colourful and, I don't know, hopeful out of all of those.
Sure.
In a weird way.
Hopeful's a good word to describe. Yeah. All the rest are like these apocalypses and just the way the places that games like The Division and Fallout take place in. I'm like, the idea that you play games for a bit of escapism and hope and a brighter future sort of thing, you kind of think, why? I don't know. They're just really dark not so much fun place to be in for me personally.
Yes, definitely.
Purely a
I think that's like
preference.
why Cyberpunk stood out, because it is a gritty city. But there's a rhyme for you. But it's absolutely gorgeous. Like, it is just filled with color and light and just craziness. So
yeah,
that
and
is
having
one
played
thing.
Android Netrunner, which is there's like a group of board games all based around this idea of cyberpunk.
Right, because Cyberpunk is based off the board game, isn't it?
Right,
So.
it's based off the board game Cyberpunk, and just like cyberpunk is the new steampunk, as in like there was a whole bunch of things, including board games, that focused on steampunk, and that was a cool thing. But honestly, I think this game will cause a lot of other things to copy that idea, and it's just a really cool. And for those who don't know, very briefly, it's this idea that in the future corporations will just have much more power, and that everything. It's like hyper-capitalism in a way. It's quite interesting.
We're kind of there already.
We're kind of there. We're not cyborgs yet, MBZ. That's the point. Like this.
No, obviously. Yeah, like as soon as we start sticking chips in our faces, then we'll transition.
There's a way to go, but I find it a very fascinating world.
Definitely.
Absolutely, and genre that I think is arguably the most exciting part of E3, and it's always the innovative ideas that do something completely new and bizarre. I think are always the things that steal E3 to some degree, and even if that means reinventing an existing formula, like Zelda Breath of the Wild or something like that. Right. Those are the games that always do best, and I think Cyberpunk got it this time.
Absolutely, yeah. It was the talk of the town. People couldn't shut up about it, so very excited for it. This is the thing. Like, I really want you to play Witcher 3, but I also think playing Witcher 3 on PS4 is just a substandard experience. I don't know how much they've improved it.
Well, I could if you want, but I don't know. There's other open world games I want to play, most notably like Red Dead 2 later this year, Spider-Man later this year, and I know you weren't so hot on it, but I do want to try Horizon on my PS4. So
I would say oh my goodness, all three of those games, the mass public, I'm sure will eat them alive. For me, none of them are going to come close to Witcher 3. It's just so far. Like, the idea that you would want to play Horizon before Witcher 3 boggles my fucking mind. Because Horizon is like an okay open world game. Witcher 3 is like set the standard for narrative and for side quests. And
there's something about the setting of Horizon that really entices me. As great as I'm sure Witcher 3 is, I'm not trying to deny that. Like, it's a fantasy setting that I just want to try something else open world this time. But yeah.
Okay. That's all I want. That's all I want is fantasy open world games, by the way. That's just my jam. That's all I care about is that. So anyway, well, Bally, I think that just about wraps up a bunch of E3 things. It was interesting year. I felt overall it was not amazing. I think a lot of the leaks were to cause for things not being that surprising, but there were some highlights in there for sure, and I, for the most part, had a good time watching it all and seeing what people had to say. So, pretty good. And I guess bring on next year another 300 and however many days until the next E3, because the countdown begins now. Until then. We've got the Game Awards though in December, so that's only 6 months to go.
I like this trend of you got your big E3 in the summer, and then you got the Game Awards and Game of the Year things happening in December. Like, it's a nice trend.
Absolutely, it's good fun, and obviously Sony has their PSX in there as well at the end of the year, so always a lot of announcements. I'm sure Nintendo will have directs coming up, so we'll have those to cover. But that's pretty much going to wrap us up as I cough myself to death in this segment, and that will be the show. So, Bally, we need to thank our patrons for helping us with this show.
Yes, thank you to all of our patrons, but most notably our two top tier $10 tier patrons, of course, Atari Alex and my girlfriend Caroline. Thank you so much for your support. We should say that Patreon is doing well. We gaining more patrons. For those who don't know, we got 2 shows available. We got T&L Ranks, comes out every other month. That is for all $2 tier patrons. We've also got our other show, T&L Takes, which comes out every other month as well on the months that the other show doesn't come out. So an extra 12 shows a year. And that is, of course, for a $5 tier for TNL Takes. We just did the TNL ranks on our top 5 E3 announcements of all time.
Moments, I guess you could say.
Moments, announcements, all that good stuff. So definitely worth checking out on that $2 tier. And you'll get all 4 episodes for $2 if you choose to support us. But again, thank you so much for everyone's support.
Thank you. Yes, that has been fantastic, and hopefully it continues to go up. Also, we are doing the Backlog Club next episode, so get playing Punch Out, and you can send all your thoughts to our email. Bally, what is that?
Our email is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Please send us your thoughts on Punch Out for Wii.
Yes, you can find us in various places. You can find the podcast on Twitter at TNL Podcast. That is where we get links to the Discord and to our YouTube channel, all the fun things. And you can find me on Twitter at LordNBZ. Bally, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91.
Fantastic. And you can find this show in various places, including iTunes, which is a place where people can go and review us and give us ratings and stuff like that. As we said on last episode, now is a good time to go and drop us a review because people are still looking for thoughts on E3 and post E3 and that kind of stuff. So if you have a review in you, it'd be fantastic if you go to iTunes and drop us one. Incredibly helpful. Very, very good for the show.
And if you found us through E3 and this is your first show listening, having subscribed, listening to us at E3, thank you for subscribing and sticking with us.
Thank you. Always a good place to find new listeners. So hopefully you enjoyed and will continue to listen to the show because we enjoy doing it for all of you. It's good fun. And yes, you can find us in all the other places. We're on Stitcher. We're on other podcast apps, podcatchers, as we say, so you can find us there. I think that is pretty much it. Bally, closing thoughts?
Why do we have to wait so long again for E3?
It's a magical time, but it wouldn't be magical if we didn't have to wait for it. It's like Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got to have the build, you got to have the slow build, but we'll have another one, of course, and maybe Nintendo will have another presentation that's just better than E3, because they tend to do that sometimes, and it's very weird. But as Nintendo, they're weird for a reason. That's why we love them, and that's why we do this show. So, hopefully Nintendo will continue to be weird, and so will we. So then we'll talk to you in 2 weeks about the weirdness, and that's going to be us. All right, see you next time, everyone. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.